Apollo 13 was a lost dot in space. 400,000 kilometers away, 3 astronauts faced death inside a damaged capsule. NASA's supercomputers were calculating rescue trajectories when suddenly the power went out. Mission control plunged into darkness. Backup systems failed too. In that moment, 65-year-old Margaret quietly stood up and pulled a 20-year-old Casio calculator from her bag. "Give me 18 hours, she said calmly. "I'll bring them home." From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story moves you, consider subscribing for more untold stories of unsung heroes who changed history. Everything was proceeding normally at NASA's Mission Control Center in Houston. Giant screens displayed Apollo 13's position in space, while hundreds of technicians and engineers worked at their consoles. The main computer room was filled with IBM's most advanced systems, the pinnacle of technology for that era. Margaret Fleming was 65 years old, grey-haired and quiet. She had been working at NASA since 1945, there since the early days of the space program. Her desk was in a small corner behind the main control area. Other engineers called her Calculator Margaret with affection and respect, because Margaret always carried that old calculator with her. A 1972 Casio model, yellowed plastic case, some keys worn smooth, scratches on the display. The young engineers saw this as a nostalgic habit. "Margaret still works the old-fashioned way," they'd say with a smile. That morning, Margaret was quietly doing her calculations as always. Handwritten notes, mechanical pencil, and of course that old Casio. Michael Chen, a 28-year-old MIT graduate engineer working at the adjacent desk, looked at Margaret. "Margaret?" Michael said gently. "Why do you keep using that calculator? Our computer can perform 100,000 operations per second. Your machine does 1 operation per second." Margaret smiled. "Michael, sometimes the simplest tools are the most reliable ones. This calculator has never let me down." "But Margaret," Michael continued, "this is the digital age. Nobody does manual calculations anymore. Everything's automated." Margaret paused and looked at Michael. "What did you learn at MIT, Michael?" "Computer engineering and space technologies." "What about when computers don't work?" Michael laughed. "Margaret, these IBM systems don't crash. They have triple backup systems. They never fail." "Houston, we have a problem here." These words from Apollo 13 became historic. Astronaut Jim Lovell's voice sounded calm but tense, and everyone in Mission Control immediately went to high alert. "Apollo 13 Houston, can you describe the problem?" "We've had an explosion in the main oxygen tank. Command module is losing power. We're switching to the lunar module." Alarms began ringing throughout Mission Control. This wasn't just a malfunction, this was life or death. 400,000 kilometers away, 3 astronauts' lives were in danger. Flight Director Gene Kranz immediately took action. "All teams, implement Apollo 13 emergency procedures. Begin safe return calculations." IBM supercomputers immediately started working. Complex orbital mechanics calculations, fuel consumption analyses, safe return trajectories. Everything was loaded into the computer within seconds. Margaret also began doing her assigned calculations, with handwritten notes and that old Casio. Michael looked over from the adjacent desk. "Margaret, the computer is already doing these calculations. Why are you—" "Michael," Margaret said calmly, "it's always good to do backup calculations for safety." For 36 hours, they had been working non-stop in Houston. Countless calculations were being made for Apollo 13's return. Every scenario was being evaluated. IBM computers worked day and night. Margaret hadn't left her desk. For 18 hours, she had been calculating by hand, noting results, checking and rechecking repeatedly. Though the elderly woman looked tired, her determination was unwavering. Just then, zit! Power outage! Mission Control was suddenly plunged into darkness. Emergency lights kicked in, but the main computer systems had crashed. "Bring backup systems online," shouted Gene Kranz. Technicians started running around, but bad news came. "Sir, backup systems aren't working either. There's been a fire in the transformer feeding the main grid. Repairs will take at least 6 hours." 6 hours? Kranz's voice cracked. "Apollo 13's oxygen runs out in 8 hours. We can't go 6 hours without systems." Panic began in mission control. Without IBM computers, orbital calculations couldn't be done. The astronauts' return trajectory couldn't be calculated. Michael put his hands to his head. "This is impossible. Doing these calculations without computers would take months." That's when Margaret quietly stood up. Seeing Margaret standing, Gene Kranz turned to her. "Margaret, what are you thinking?" Margaret pulled that old Casio calculator from her bag. "Gene," Margaret said calmly, "give me 18 hours. I'll bring them home." Everyone in mission control turned to Margaret. Michael's mouth fell open. "Margaret, you're not serious, are you? Doing these calculations by hand is impossible." Margaret smiled. "Michael, I've been calculating since 1945. How do you think we did it before computers?" Gene Kranz assessed the situation. He had no other choice. "Margaret, are you sure your calculations will be accurate?" "Gene, I've been doing this job for 25 years. I've never been wrong." Margaret sat at her desk and began working. Handwritten notes, mechanical pencil, that old Casio calculator, and 25 years of experience. First, she calculated Apollo 13's current position, distance to Earth, velocity, orbital parameters. She did each calculation 3 times, checking them. Then she began calculating safe return trajectories. How to maneuver using the moon's gravitational pull, fuel consumption, timing, everything. Other teams in mission control helped as much as they could, but the main calculations were done by Margaret, with that old Casio. Hours passed. Margaret worked non-stop. Michael came over with water. "Margaret, how's it going?" "Good, Michael." "This calculator has never surprised me." "But how can you trust it so much?" Margaret paused for a second. "Michael, I bought this calculator in 1972. I've used it every day since then. I know it. It's never been wrong." "But Margaret, it's just a machine." "No, Michael, it's an extension of me. No different from my hands, my brain. We've worked together for 25 years. Early morning, 6 a.m. Margaret had been working non-stop for 16 hours. The elderly woman's eyes were red from fatigue, but her determination remained intact. She was doing the final calculations. Apollo 13's atmospheric entry angle. This was critical. Too steep and it would burn up. Too shallow and it would skip off. She pressed the keys on the Casio, calculating. Writing down the result, calculating again. Everything had to be perfect. Gene Kranz came over. "Margaret, how's it going?" "Done, Gene. The calculations to bring Apollo 13 home are ready." Kranz couldn't believe it. "Are you sure, Margaret?" Margaret pointed to that old Casio. "Gene, this machine has never been wrong. It won't be wrong today either." At 8 a.m., the electrical system was repaired. IBM computers came back online. Technicians immediately loaded Apollo 13 calculations into the computer. Michael excitedly waited for the results. Now we'll see how accurate Margaret's calculations were. The computer results came out. Michael looked at the screen and froze. Margaret's hand calculations matched IBM's supercomputer's calculations with 99.97% accuracy. This is impossible," Michael muttered. "How did she get such accurate results with that old calculator?" Gene Kranz turned to Margaret. "Margaret, you're a miracle." Margaret smiled. "No, Gene, I'm just someone who knows her job, and I have a reliable tool." Margaret's calculated trajectory was implemented exactly. Apollo 13 used the moon's gravitational pull to safely return to Earth. On April 17, 1970, Apollo 13 successfully splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. 3 astronauts were saved. Cheers erupted in Mission Control. Everyone was hugging each other. Jean Krantz approached Margaret and hugged her. "Margaret, you saved 3 lives." Margaret smiled humbly. "Jean, we saved them as a team." Michael also came to Margaret's side. "Margaret, I apologize. I'll never underestimate that calculator again." Margaret held that old Casio in her hand. "Michael, no matter how advanced tools become, the most important thing is the person who uses them. This machine served me for 25 years. I trusted it." From that day on, Margaret's story became legend at NASA. Calculator Margaret was no longer a joke, but a nickname spoken with respect. That old Casio calculator began being displayed in a special case at the NASA Museum. The plaque read, "Casio calculator used in Apollo 13 rescue operation," a symbol of harmony between human and technology. Even after Margaret retired, young engineers would come to her, trying to benefit from her experience. She always gave the same advice: see technology as a tool, not as a master. Even the most advanced computer cannot replace your experience. Engineers working at NASA today still tell Margaret Fleming's story. They tell new interns, "Remember, it wasn't IBM's supercomputer that saved Apollo 13. It was 25 years of experience, a reliable tool, and a spirit that never gave up." And yes, that old Casio calculator still stands in the NASA Museum. Thousands of visitors see it every day and wonder, how could this simple machine perform a more critical task than the most advanced computers? The answer is simple. The power of tools is only as great as the experience and determination of the person who uses them.